Real Conversations in the QC is sponsored by Accentra Credit Union.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for this episode of Real Conversations. This month, we are re-airing some of our most impactful segments of the year, from violence prevention to Black single motherhood to National Reading and Literacy Months. We covered a lot of ground this year, so sit back and enjoy a recap of the best of the year.
Today I have Tila Shore, who is the Director of Community Violence Prevention at Family Resources. T, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. So, talking about violence prevention, tell me what you do at Family Resources.
So, I am the Community Violence Intervention Director at Family Resources. I oversee the Homicide and Other Violent Crimes team. I oversee the Group Violence Intervention Initiative, and I also oversee the CAP team, which stands for Coordinated Assessment Program. Our Homicide and Other Violent Crimes team, we serve survivors of homicide, of course, arson, child abuse, elder abuse, family domestic. We serve everyone that is not impacted by domestic violence or sexual assault and breaking traffic. So we're kind of like a catch-all program. Our group violence intervention program it's not a program, it's an initiative. So I want to be clear in saying that our initiative is working with the community around firearm prevention and violence, and making sure that we get the word out that we want to see people safe, alive, and out of jail. And so we work with survivors of that, but we also work with the community to feel safe because we know firearm violence is prevalent. And then CAP, our coordinated assessment program, is our wraparound services. So we tie that in with GVI, and so we know that some of the youth that we in our community are involved in some of those violent acts, and so we take that program and we use it as our wraparound services for the Davenport School District, as well as the youth we know that are involved in some of those violent acts.
Mm-hmm. So pretty much anything that is associated with violence, you have resources all around the way, all ages, doesn't matter.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. 0 to 99.
Yep. Okay, so that's great. So what challenges do you face in your work, and how do you overcome them?
So I will say we face many challenges, and some of that is because people are not aware of our services first off, and so we make sure that we continue to do outreach on a continuous basis. Another challenge that I've seen with rolling out the group violence intervention initiative is when we're showing up at your door to do custom notifications. And let me just tell you what custom notifications are, so you know exactly what I'm speaking of. Custom notifications are where there's a police officer, there's social services, and then there's an honored community member that go to the door and say, hey, look, we know that you might be a victim of gun violence. We know that you might be involved in some of the acts of gun violence. And what we want to do is keep our community safe. We want the violence to stop, but we know that there's some needs here. And so we're here to offer a genuine extension of help. And so when we go out to do custom notifications, it's a little weird to see all three entities standing at your door. Sometimes you might see one or the other, but not all three together. And so the challenge has been getting the community to buy in. And so we started in Davenport, Iowa, and that is going really well now because people know we're showing up and we really care about them, and we want to bridge the gap and build relationships. And in Rock Island, we're just getting started. And so the challenge here is having that buy-in. And so that's the challenge with group violence intervention, and just, being used to all three entities showing up at your door. And then coordinated assessment program, it's just making sure that, we have those wraparound services. And so some of the challenges are making sure that all people have what they need. And so we rely on the families and the clients to tell us what they need. And so some of that can be a challenge. And then having that open communication about what you need is also a challenge, because no one wants to appear to be a burden to anyone. And so we want to make sure that the relationships are there and we're addressing some of those challenges as well.
So circling back to the challenge with where all three of the entities,
Yes, ma'am.
what's the name of
Custom
that?
notification.
Custom notification. Okay. So what is like the protocol for that? Do you guys, is it certain like police calls that you've received until you show up, or is it first defense? How does that work?
So law enforcement identifies, our partnership with law enforcement has been really successful because they have opened up a door where we communicate about the things that are going on in the community as well. So law enforcement identifies individuals who have either been a victim or could potentially be a victim of violence, also could possibly be a retaliatory act. And so what we do is we go out and try to intervene before any of that takes place. And so also we know that people are associated with other people in the community that may be committing some of those crimes. And so what we go out and do is say, look, we're not here to serve notice on anybody about any violence, but we know that there's some violence happening around you or within that environment that you're in. And so we go and we have conversations about the violence and how we really want the community to thrive. And then social services kind of takes over. So we want people to understand that we're not there to serve like a warrant or any kind of warning, but we do want our community safe and the violence to stop.
Hmm. So, leading up to that, with especially going to specific communities, so how do you involve the community in violence prevention programs?
We have a group of community members that go out and do those custom notifications with us, and we want people that have lived experiences. And so that's what we rely on. I go to the community members that have been honored for years because every community has a hero that has more authority than what I have or a law enforcement coming in. And it's just been built off relationships. And so we go out and we do outreach. We, are going out and talking to people about our initiative. And we have some very honorable community members that come on board and do those custom notifications with us. And a lot of times they know, the homes or the families that we're going to their houses to work with. And so that's been very successful because, again, it's not every day that you see social services, an honored community member, and law enforcement showing up to your door to say, we want to help you. We want to build a relationship and not serve any kind of consequences.
Yeah, and then I think that that's great, especially in the Black community. It's
Absolutely.
where we are, is someone that's notable who I respect to, that safe person for
Yes,
me. And
yes.
then seeing, people that look like me that I don't know who you are, but you're showing up at my door and you guys are trying to, get me on the right path. That's powerful.
Yes.
That is very powerful.
And after that, we do follow up. So if there's, a GED that's needed, or you need, some academic advocacy, medical advocacy, employment. I mean, we come in and we assess all of your needs, even if it's the little, big, small things, is what we call them, driver's license, a birth certificate. We're showing up to extend a genuine offer of help, not to serve any consequences about anything.
That's great. That is amazing. So what role does education and awareness play in approach to all of your programs?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, it's big. I mean, we know that there's marginalized communities, of course, that don't always know about the programming and services. And so that outreach piece, that education and bringing awareness to the entire city is what our goal is, because we want people to know we are here. We don't want you to just show up when something has occurred or violence is occurring. We want to be preventative in our measures. And so if there's a school that there's a group of kids that we know may be having some minor issues, let's get me in there. Let us do some support groups, or get my staff in and let's talk about how violence, how we can prevent violence and how we can keep you safe. And so I think education and awareness is key to making sure people have appropriate programming and services.
Yes, I definitely agree. So what are some common misconceptions about violence prevention that you've encountered?
Common misconceptions that we're just here for a short while. This is just a program. I have been a witness in my own community of many programs that have come and go. And I think the work that we are doing, it is going to occur whether I'm here or not. And so I think our community has been programmed enough. And so that's why we take the take the approach of an initiative with the Group Violence Intervention Initiative because it's something that we don't want to be another program. And so I think sometimes when I tell people what we're doing, they're like, oh, this is just another program, or this will go away, or there'll be some type of systemic barrier that'll be placed where I can't get services. And that's just not the truth. We are here. We are genuinely here extending offers of help. And so it's not going away anytime soon.
How impactful has it been in our community? Can you share some like results with us now?
So I think, what I will say is we've done at least 150 custom notifications, and we have at least 70 of those who have become come into services. And so I think that is very impactful. But we also have had a decrease in crime
Yes.
and car thefts, and so that is speaking volumes to what we're out doing as far as outreach and custom notifications and really talking to people and building relationships. I think people are starting to feel safe. And so when we look at our data from our surveys, we know that 90% of the people that we're serving reply that they feel safer now that they have our services. And so I think that's the biggest impact that we can have in our community. People are starting to feel safe in their
Yes,
environments.
that is huge. So, how can individuals and communities support your work, T, and contribute to violence prevention?
We have a volunteer program. Please come and volunteer. We want people that are passionate about the work that we're doing to get out on the streets with us or get into other organizations and make sure that people are aware of the services and make sure that they know that they're genuine people that care and want to provide those services. But we also have those community members that I talked about doing custom notifications. If you know you are vital in our community, come on board. Walk beside us. It doesn't just take one of us, it takes all of us. And then if you know in the community that there's an event or something going on, let me know. I'm going to show up. I'm going to have staff show up. I'm going to bring out the whole community if possible. We want to make sure that the people in our community we all serve see us all together, cohesive and as a united front.
And any specific organizations?
So I have my own organization, which is Tee It Up Movements that I do outside of work. And it's culturally specific. And what I'm working to do is build my community up because I know that there's been some struggles. But I also know that there's been some generational things that we haven't entirely been able to get away from. And so I'm not saying I'm the expert in that, but what I am saying is I have lived experience. And so I want to utilize that to, give my community a hand up and not a handout because we don't need that. But also the boxing club. Ramsey and his family has been very vital in making sure these kids are off the street and doing something different than being violent. They're learning a craft, they're learning a skill, and they're exhibiting it, and they're winning. And then you have our sororities and fraternities in our area. They're working all the time in our community. So I want to shout them out. The Lincoln Center. I mean, there's so many organizations that are doing the work and that we are standing united in this front together that, I missed probably a whole bunch of them, but if I didn't say their names, I am proud of them and I want to shout them out. So keep working for our community.
And how do our viewers learn more about the Community Violence Intervention Program at Family Resources and your organization?
You can check us out at FAMRES, FAMRES.org. That's our website. Or you can contact me directly at TL@famres.org. And I'm T. LaShore. That's TEEL at famres.org. Hit me up. I got you.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yes.
CJ Parker.
Yes.
It is a pleasure to meet you.
Absolutely. You as well. You're amazing.
Well, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Grew up in the Quad Cities. I'm a musician now. I feel like I've been a musician all my life. The word musician has multiple connotations.
Oh,
it
yeah.
could mean I'm a singer or an artist or a producer, or I play a bunch of instruments. I say that I'm like that whole thing. So I just say musician now.
Okay.
But yeah, that's kind of my thing. Grew up doing music all my life, and so yeah.
What got you interested in music?
From a young age, church. My dad's a pastor, and at the time he was a minister in the area, and I grew up learning from some very expert figures in the music world in church. The organ players, the drummers, the guitar players, or whatever. So, and my dad was also the choir director. So I learned 3-part harmony at a really young age. And my mom was a singer, so I learned how to sing at 2 years old and was singing West Side Story when I was a kid. So music kind of started, I didn't have a choice. It was kind of those things. If you grow up in LeBron James's household, then you're probably going to be a basketball player. That was kind of me with music, so.
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you're talking about when you talk about, growing up in the church and being musically inclined within the church. I'm Second Baptist Church of
Yes,
Merced girl,
absolutely,
and
yes.
so, you see all of these people who are just excellent musicians,
Yes.
excellent organ players,
Yes.
piano players, guitar players, singers, who will never be on a national or international stage,
Right.
but they are professional in every way.
Yeah.
Was that sort of what got you started, what put you into this position now?
Yeah, I feel like it was inevitable because my ears were always surrounded with it, whether it was a choir rehearsal, whether it was a service. And then, because my dad was the choir director, I had the chance to sit behind the drummer and sit behind the organ and watch them do what they do. And church itself is we say it's the best music school in the world because you learn from people who do it their entire lives, and they do it to give God glory. And so we feel like that's the best weapon ever. And to see that at a young age is what kind of fueled me to try it out myself, So being around musicians like that, then there's so many, I can name like so many around here in this area, but they really helped me become who I am.
Okay, the topic for this month is literacy, and there are different types of literacy, especially in music,
Yeah.
because that's a voice people use to communicate as well.
Absolutely.
Why do you think that's such an important subject for
Yeah. Well, I'm a teacher, and so I always ask my kids the first day, which is actually funny enough, today is my first day as a band director at Rivermont Collegiate. And so the first question I'm going to ask them, and what I ask a lot of kids is, raise your hand if you like music. And most of them will raise their hand. There's always one or two kids like, I don't like music. And I go, you don't like music? And they're like, no, I don't even like it. And I was like, okay, before you continue, who's your favorite artist? And they'll name me 4 rappers. They'll name me a whole bunch of stuff. I'm like, oh, so you do like music? And all the kids are like, ooh. And it always happens like that. But I think music is probably the most intricate language and most important language in our society. Music has a way of being transcended throughout each language. There's people that I performed with before that are from the United Kingdom, that are from China, that are from different places, and we all can play the same thing. And we all can read the same music. We all can listen to the same music and get the same feel. So it's really important. And if you don't have music like a part of your life, like if you're not like getting in your car and turning on music, I think you probably have a little weird life. Like, I think it's very a silent, weird life. I don't know of anybody that does that. You can listen to your podcasts and stuff, but even podcasts have music. Right. There's music everywhere, whether you're watching a TV show, whether you're watching a movie, there has to be music. So I think it's the best language. I guess I'm biased, though.
Now, you said that you're teaching at Rivermont Collegiate.
Yes.
And you're talking about teaching kids.
Yes.
What is it that kids know and come into music with a sort of special idea or gift
Yeah.
how do you teach a child?
Yeah. So I think the best thing to learn, and the thing to learn for educators as well, is every kid thinks differently. We know this when we teach kids language arts. We know this when we teach kids reading and things like that. But when it comes to music, we expect them to be in a bottle. And that's something that I want to help break. Every kid thinks differently about music. And there may be some times where they're listening to artists that you may not have heard of, but you need to cater towards what they like rather than what you think they should like. I think that's really important for me being a band director, there's things that you have to learn. There's a foundation that you absolutely do have to learn. But when it comes down to it, if a kid loves doing something, then we need to cater towards them doing that thing. And music is, like I said, a universal language. There's so many different connotations. There's so many different ways we interpret music. There's jazz, there's blues, there's rock, there's soul, there's funk, there's R&B. But in the grand scheme of things, music is music. And we all speak differently. I think when kids come into class, and I ask them who your favorite artist is, they name an artist, some kids go, ooh, or some kids go, that's trash, right? But I think that's the beauty of it. We like what we like. And that's the first recognition for a child of, oh, I prefer this.
Right.
And it's, the first thing that they prefer is probably a snack or something like that. But then they're like, I don't like this music and I like this music. This is one of the first things that we see of kids deciding and kids doing something for themselves. So I think it's really important to cater to what they like to do rather than what we think we should input on them.
When I was a kid, I took violin lessons for 7 years.
Okay, all right.
And I loved it.
Yeah.
I had a good time doing it. Didn't like practicing all the time.
Right.
But I eventually got to a point where I joined a youth orchestra.
Sure.
And I quit. I realized that I was never going to be as good as the people around me who wanted to do this as a profession.
Sure.
Who wanted to do this as a job and who were much more dedicated about practice and about doing this.
Sure.
Do you ever run into any of that with the people that you teach?
Absolutely. I can tell you, as someone who was also a part of ensembles and growing up and doing music and things like that, you see people that work harder because they want to be better at it. I think you see it in any sport or anything. You always see some people that are like, oh, they're really good at it. I don't know if I can get to that level. That's where we have to meet the kid where they're at. That's where we have to go, okay, what can I do to make your experience better? A lot of times, educators can be focused on winning, being the best that their ensemble can be. And then in that, you start to lose children because they're like, oh, well, I don't know. I might not be working hard as them, or I don't know if I can match up to what they're doing. That's when we have to meet the kid where they are and go, hey, what makes you excited about music? And that's where we get back to the cater to them thing. That's really important. Before a kid who's might not be sure about if they want to continue whatever, there are other avenues. Absolutely. There is theater, there's drama, there is choir, there's show choirs big around this area. Like, there are other ways that you can get into music. And I think if your educator is making you feel a certain way, if you're going and doing these other things, then we have to reevaluate our educators. That's what I'm looking to start to change as well. But yeah.
Music has played a huge role in the American songbook.
Absolutely.
But also, when you think about American music, you think about the Black influences
Yes.
in all different aspects
Yes.
of American music.
Yes.
How do you teach that?
So another cool thing is here where we are, we're at Common Chord right now.
Yeah.
And what we teach a lot about is blues and the foundation of blues. And we were just talking about sinners and stuff like that.
Right,
But
yeah.
the foundation of blues comes from Black music, comes from Negro spirituals. It comes from the call and response and the anguish and pain and the communication. And that is something that I think is more important to talk about than a popular artist right now. We need to make sure that the foundation is set and that the kids know where this music comes from. Because if we're talking about, the American Revolution, if we're talking about World War II, I know in school, we know those pinpoints. We can tell you how World War II started. We can talk to you about Archduke Franz Ferdinand. We
Yeah.
can talk about all those things. But when we get to blues music, where we get to certain types of music, we only talk about what's going on now and not what started it.
Yeah.
And I think Black music has a lot to do with the foundation. Not only what I'm talking about blues, but country, R&B,
Right.
jazz, funk, gospel, all that stuff starts with Black people.
And I think, there are a lot of kids out there who have no idea who Big Mama Thornton is.
Yeah, right,
But once they hear that, and
Yes.
I've seen this happen, they realize, oh my goodness, who is that?
Absolutely.
And they want to know more.
Absolutely.
And they want to hear more.
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
I'm sure that's something that you pass along to your students.
Absolutely, especially in the grand scheme of there's a thing that we like call samples,
Yeah.
where artists now are sampling what artists were doing before, and they'll be like, "Ooh, I love this song. Like, I love what they're doing in this song," and we go, "That's actually from that. That's actually from." Etta James. That's actually from Stevie Wonder. That's actually from Michael Jackson in the 60s. And they go, oh, okay. You know, so that's another thing that we sort of run into that we love to talk about as well.
You know, when we talk about music, we talk about its effects on people's emotions, but there are also cognitive effects.
Sure.
There are also effects, you know, when people are teaching, when they are learning, when that help them along the way through high school, through
Yeah.
college.
Right.
How do you impart the importance of that to your students?
I think it's really important to understand when we're talking about music, I think it's as important as talking about math. I think it's as important as talking about history, because it is history, as we've talked about. Like I said, kids morph into what they want to understand, what they want to learn, and in the end, when you go to college, you pick what you want to learn. You pick what you want to be, what you're good at, and what you want to excel at. And at the end of the day, I feel like music is going to be a part of whatever you're going to do.
Exactly.
Any capacity, it's going to be a part of it. So why not embrace it? Why not take the time? Hey, I'm going to try out some new music, because music can also change your mood. It can change how you're feeling when you wind down after the day. You're going to turn on some music. Okay, I need to clean my house. I'm going to turn this on, or I'm going to do some homework. I'm going to turn this on. Things to help focus you. I think it's like the best. I don't want to say drug, but music is definitely the best thing. Influence, for sure. Absolutely.
What do you think is the future of music?
Oh, we could go two different ways.
That's way too
I know, we could,
broad a question.
So no, it's. I think the future of music has. I'm different, like you said. I have a positive outlook on it. I think music is going to become better than we've ever thought. It's starting right now, where the things that are being produced and put out not only are being sampled, but they're being recreated in a way that the young person can understand and resonate with. I think words are more important than beats, and the words that are being written right now have a negative connotation, especially when we go to the rappers and things like that. Those words have a negative connotation, which leads to a negative society. Music is powerful. We've been talking about this the whole time. Music is the universal language. So when that universal language is negative, then what do we expect our outcome to be? So I think we're shifting to a more positive era. We want to dance more. We want to move more. We want to sing more. This TikTok era has changed music as well, to where people want to record themselves singing to a song. And I think that is changing the outlook of society, to where everybody wants to be happy. Everybody wants to smile. I think there's an innocence in, I feel, the upcoming era. In music, there's going to be an innocence to where people are going to want to go, I love this music. I just want to dance and I just want to have fun. Because my parents always talked about the older eras, like the 70s and 80s, and how people were just dancing. Dancing and having a good time, listening to music.
Watching the Soul Train.
Yeah, Soul Train, and just doing the Soul Train line and just having a good time and embracing the music that was being played. And it's kind of shifted into an era where we're listening to hear negativity.
Grittier.
Yeah, very, very more, because that's the time we're in. That's the time we were in, especially when COVID hit. The music that was in COVID, like, go back and listen to some of the stuff that was released in 2020. Everybody was sad. Everybody. There was not a single everyone was like, what is going on? How are we going to get through this? And I think we've passed that era. We're now in 2025. And I feel like we want to be happy again. So the music that's going to be created for the next generation is going to be not only excellent because the technology in the right way is being used very well, in the right way. in the right way, because there's also AI, and it scares me. It really does scare me. But I think this next era is going to be a really accomplished group of people, really accomplished musicianship, and I think that language is just going to get stronger and stronger.
CJ Parker, thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you so much.
Dr. Tiffany Stoner Harris, welcome to Real Conversations.
Thank you.
How are you doing today?
Good.
Good.
Glad to be here.
It's good to have you here. I'm glad you decided to do this. Like always, I think we're going to learn a lot today. Talking about co-parenting, of course, and I love the conversation that we had off camera. Learning a lot. Those are always sometimes the best conversations I have. But I really want to get into some. I know with co-parenting, talking to some other people that I know about co-parenting, there's some positives with it, and sometimes there's some challenges every now and then. But let's talk about you and your co-parenting right now. Why don't we start with a little bit, how did your co-parenting journey begin, and what was those early days like?
Ooh. Okay, so my co-parenting journey began 18 years ago. It's been a long time.
Mhm.
However, it's just as fresh today as it was back then. Ironically, I say even though our three daughters are all adults, there's still very much elements of co-parenting. They're all single adults, so they're still pretty connected to family. But kind of going back to answer your
Mhm.
question, in the beginning, I would say it was definitely a learning process. Going from being a two-parent household, intact family, as some would say, to and actually my ex-husband was military at the time, and so not only were we divorcing, but he was also relocated within that time frame as well, to another state, and so we were co-parenting across state lines, which was interesting, a challenge for sure at times.
Right.
Just trying to make sure the girls stay connected, with their dad and vice versa. But in the beginning, I would say, for me, I was trying to balance my own grief and loss of the marriage while also trying to be my healthiest self for the girls and parenting, being their full-time parent. And so there were more challenges for sure during those early days, and really just trying to figure out how to co-parent with a person who, we had ultimately parted ways,
Right.
as far as our dynamic with each other. And so, I think for me, it was really centering the girls. I had to, in all my decisions that were made, especially in those early years, of just really prioritizing them, centering them. The good thing is, I would say we were able to, some of what I call like the business matters,
Mhm.
we were able to, those things were kind of worked out in the beginning. And so we didn't have as much conflict in those areas. I appreciate and I'm thankful that, we both knew we were dedicated to raising the girls in the best way that we could. And so I think we were on the same page in that way.
Okay.
So that helped.
I would think, and going back when you said, he had, besides the break,
Mhm.
it wasn't just that he's possibly moving across town. I mean, it was tough
Mm.
that he's moving out of state.
Yes.
And I'm sure that had to be conversation. How do we do this together? How do we co-parent? Because evidently you guys made the decision that we want to be parenting together here.
Mhm.
But being that far away, and the girls at the time, which I thought your girls now were probably young.
Yes.
I mean, even though they still are young, but
Yes.
them being young, that had to be tough on them and things. So
It was. I mean, they were 9, 7, turning 7, and 2, turning 3 that year. So,
mhm.
our youngest daughter, in those early years, like she had no recollection of us as a married couple. And so I think that was one of the things that really kind of pushed me to make sure like they stayed connected. And even that their dad and I she was able to see us work collaboratively together.
Right.
Even though we weren't, we were no longer a married couple, but I just thought that was important for her to see that, that part.
So what changed over time? The breakup happens. He moves out of state. Girls are young. It's a shock to everybody. But over the years, I guess what the positive things was a lot of just open communications, that you have a good network of family and friends here, as well as him having a good network. How did that grow?
Yeah, I would say, we were fortunate to have a support system. So his family here, my family here, really just wrapped around the girls. And so that was a blessing in itself. Communication, we didn't always communicate in the best ways in the beginning. However, I will say, whenever we disagreed early on, and even to this day, I'd say, we were able to kind of shield the girls from that. So, they didn't have to hear or see or be a part of those disagreements. And I am truly thankful for that, because I feel like that was also a part of that stability that they needed to see us working together, even though he and I knew that, we weren't seeing eye to eye, and, maybe sometimes didn't even really like each other, if I'm being honest. But they didn't have to know that. Yeah. And that's so important, for parents to really figure out how to have those disagreements and be, in authentic relationships, but also how to navigate or, move in a different way so that the kids don't get hurt in that process, because you will disagree. Like, if you didn't disagree, you'd probably still be married,
Right. There you go.
So, I mean, that's a part of, that's just going to naturally happen, but it's how you deal with it.
Yeah. So were there times that, like, say, those disagreements, sometimes it can be some small disagreements, and other times it could be some big disagreements, and sometimes the blame game might want to, hey, and you have to hold off on that, I'm assuming.
Yes. Yeah. So compromise, I say you have to be able to compromise. So for me, compromise came into play as long as it wasn't something around safety, physical safety, emotional safety, mental safety. As long as those things were okay, I might not agree on when the girls are there, and some rules in the household might not be my rules, but as long as there was no, like, again, any concern for safety.
Right.
I just had to kind of sit in that, and, it didn't always feel good. So I'm just being honest, it didn't always feel good, but again, being able to prioritize them and not let them get caught in this tug of war.
Thank you so much for being a part of Real Conversations with us.
For having me.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's such an important topic.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you too.
Joining me for this segment of Real Conversations is Shelly Moore-Guy. She's a published author, a former poet laureate, that is, and a great storyteller, that is, of course. Shelly, thank you for joining me for this segment.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Of course. In addition to your many, many titles, again, you're a storyteller, performance artist, published poet. Take me back to when you first began to learn to read and write. Was it something that started within your home as a child?
Yes, it started in my home as a child, and then combining that with my early elementary school education. There were always books in the home. My parents loved to read, and we watched them read, and then they read to us. And I remember in elementary school learning letters, how they first start writing,
tracing them out.
Well, there's a whole row of A's, and then there's a whole row of, and that was just exciting to me because now I was going to be able to do the things that my parents were doing. And that was, an older brother was reading, always reading. And so it was just, that whole literacy thing that includes writing. We all love to write that was back in the day where we had cursive as well. But that whole beginning to learn those letters and knowing that those letters eventually became these words. And so we had these books in class. And back then it was, Spot and Jane and, See Spot Run and all those kinds of very small little sentences and words. And it was just so exciting. I remember feeling very excited. The other thing is that our parents took us to the library. So at a very young age, we spent lots of time at libraries. Now, the Rock Island Library, of course, had a children's section as children's library as it does now, but they also had puppet shows and these kinds of things on Saturdays. And so grew up with a love of reading words. And then there was another place, and that was the library where you could go and you could spend a lot of time there. And that's what we did. So it was a combination of what was happening at home and school. I went to a school that was, very much into teaching us to read, and there were books in classrooms, and the bookmobile. I don't know if anybody remembers the bookmobile.
Because I had Scholastic. They would come to the school
Well,
and do
yeah,
the
it was
book fairs.
a large, back in the day, there was a large bus, and the bus was filled with books. And so once a week or once every couple weeks, it would be parked at your school, and you would go in and check books out. Because by now, you have a library card. That's a big deal. People, kids had library cards, and then in 2 weeks they would come, and you would exchange your books. You would bring your books back, and then you would get more. So there was always that. It was a given that these things were happening around books. You never heard of a bookmobile? Huh?
No, I did. I'm sorry. I book fairs was kind of a typical thing for me. I remember the book fair. Once a year, you come, you bring some money. You're hoping you have like $5 to get that perfect book.
Yeah. So I don't know when the bookmobile stopped running around here, but it was a big deal.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, you say your parents did read to you.
Yes.
What is it about that act that you just enjoyed so much?
Well, I found out later, because I did that with my children as well. And then I found out later that is like one of the best things that you could do for your child, with your child. So I still have memories of my parents reading books and actually acting out the stories, not physically, but with their voices. They made listening fun. And so that sparks an energy and a desire to want to do that yourself.
Right.
And so I took what I had been given as a child, and when I began to have children, I knew that was important to me. It was later when I found out it was important for them. That is the act that sparked my love for reading, or added to my love for reading. Their act of reading to me. And then I began to do that with my own children, and now they have memories. Yeah. So those are things that they'll keep going. Those kinds of things. Yes,
for sure. Continuing off of that, now your book of poetry, Remembering Melodies, a thank you note, it examines and celebrates family and community. What impact would you say family and community can have on a child in their early years as they begin to learn how to read?
That's very interesting. Well, first of all, as it goes with your parents, we learned that it was important because they were reading. We actually watched them read. You know what I'm saying? It's one thing to say to your children, you kids need to You need to read, right? You need to pick up but they never see you reading even the newspaper. And back then, we all would be able to look at the newspaper. And so, and that was something that my father always said. And I have a poem called Remembering Melodies. And that poem is about, and the first line is, I learned about the music in books at my daddy's knee. And so when I say that, the music are the words and the way that they would express the words. It was music to our ears. And so when you have a family that's doing that, and then you belong to a larger community, and they appreciate that as well, it's like commonplace.
Right.
It's like something that you don't think about, and they expect that you will learn to read, and you will learn to read well.
Right.
So there's an expectation. It's second nature.
Right. Absolutely.
And that's why it's so important. And it's mirroring where kids are, we're showing this behavior to them. They automatically will believe that these are the things that we should do. When that is not happening in community, we see the results of that. I think there have been some things that have changed, not for the better. And we need to go back to, I think that's why we're having this conversation. We're talking about, we're hoping that we all decide that those things are so important. We need to intentionally add those elements
back into
our lives intentionally with children.
Right. Absolutely.
Yes.
Now, you've gone to schools in Rock Island reading your book, How Little Billy Learned to Play, and in addition to the family tree to children. How important is the act of regular reading crucial for enhancing literacy starting at a young age?
Well, we see that, as I was just talking about, we see that in schools, and that's why, schools are trying to do they're keeping that thing going, they often have programs where they have people coming in to read to children because they realize, they understand that is so important, that people from the community come in and read, and they want kids to mirror that behavior. Because if so-and-so across the street or someone, a celebrity in my community comes in and reads, if the police officers, if the mayor, if these people come in to read, then it must be something important.
Now, the nation's report card for 2024, this is a mouthful, regarding reading and math came out in late January and showed that when you look at the nation, overall, schools have failed to recover from the learning losses during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, but in Illinois and Iowa specifically, it showed mostly steady results. The eighth graders specifically excelled in reading. Only 2 states scored higher than Illinois and 3 higher than in Iowa. Overall, Illinois is doing fairly well, especially compared to the national average. Math has seen little improvement, but reading specifically is staying steady with slight dips. On the other side of the river, Iowa shows steady results, but with slight declines, especially in math and reading over the years. But it's still performing better than the national average in most areas. What does this tell you about where we are going when it comes to childhood literacy?
Like I said, we have to intentionally, strengthen our game, our plan. There has to be a strategy. We know that COVID, we took a hit. These children who could not go to school anymore, and they had to be homeschooled, and now here's a tablet. You figure, I let me just say that I applaud all the parents and the teachers and everyone who had to figure this out. But we know that kids suffered, and reading, those kinds of things, did suffer. So we would like to think, well, they weren't in school, so they could read more. Come on.
Not quite. Yeah.
That probably didn't happen. Maybe it did. I applaud any parent who was able to get their kids to read more, but we know that psychologically, it was devastating for a lot of families. And so we just go back to the drawing board. We go back to what works, what we know worked, just because 20 years ago some things worked, or 30 years ago, and we think that we're in 2025 and those things can't work anymore, that's not true. Let's go back to what worked. So that's what that tells me. That tells me that now we have to continue to roll up our sleeves and get busy and figure out, we see before COVID and even now, we were seeing different things that were happening in some neighborhoods, maybe not around here, but in other places, where someone, and this is very innovative, on corners, on street corners and neighborhoods, there was a table or some kind of a cabinet with books. And so kids and whoever could go and pick a book right out of the neighborhood and then maybe replace it with another book. These are innovative things. These are people who are actually sitting down, trying to figure out how to reach kids. I've seen all kinds of stories about people who just create programs, just regular folks who are committed to understanding and believing that reading is fundamental. And so they just create these innovative, my girlfriend, Johnny Woods, several years ago, created a program that way. And so she collected books, children's books from everywhere. She wrote grants and bought books, and she put together some volunteers, and she brought these books into the housing complex where children are. And she partnered with the Rock Island Housing Authority to get into these spaces. And so 2 or 3 times a week, she and her volunteers would go in and bring books to kids on a regular basis.
Business, right. Continuing that.
These are things that we can do. We don't have to do them as individuals. We have friends and family and different people, organizations who their main objective is literacy. And so there are things that we can do, and I'm very excited about that. I just read something actually today or late last night about similar programs and how it is still so important that we make sure that kids have these tools before before 3rd grade. That this is important, this is essential. And so we need to continue to get that message out. And then we need to do more than talk. As I said, we've got to create, strategize, make it happen, because we can.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, there are so many adults out there who, unfortunately, even as in their later years in life, still do not know how to read and write. What steps would you recommend someone of an older age who desires to read but doesn't even know where to start?
Well, I personally probably would ask them to start at their community colleges. It's Black Hawk College or Scott Community College. Start, talk to your children's teachers or wherever, but there are programs, adult literacy programs that would assist an individual like that, and with great results. So I would start at those learning institutions or someone that you trust. Ask them. I think that it's important to note that sometimes, and this covers all of us, that we sometimes lack certain things, and then we're afraid to say it. We're afraid to tell it. We're afraid to, because we feel a certain way about that. But then it's up to the individual to take that step. And we all have to do it. Right. For one reason or another, we've had to do that.
So you brought your book, Family Tree. Tell me more about that as well.
The Family Tree is, it really is a story. It's a children's story. And it tells a story of my ancestors who were enslaved in Glasgow, Kentucky. And specifically my great-great-grandfather. His name's Charlie Wilson. He was born in 1836. They were on a farm or plantation. His mother, his sister, and brother. And he got married to my great-great-grandmother there. They were owned by the same person there in Kentucky. My grandfather and his brother, Sandy Terry, they were owned by different people, joined a Union regiment during the Civil War. That was 108th United States Colored Troops. That regiment was sent here to Rock Island to guard Confederate prisoners at the Rock Island prison camp. So in other words, there were prison camps during the war, several around the country. We had one here in Rock Island, which is now the site of the Rock Island Arsenal. And so that regiment was sent here. Following the end of the war, that group of individuals, my grandfather, his brother, sister Celia, and mother Rachel, all came back here to Rock Island to live. And that's how my family got here. And so that's what this book is about, the family tree. We have his story, Charlie's story, because he was interviewed by a man named John Harburg in the early 1900s. And so we have that interview. We actually have his interview. And so I based that story off of Charlie's words. But what I really wanted to share is that I'm excited about the fact that the family tree will be integrated into the Rock Island Milan District 41 school curriculum for elementary students. So I wanted to say that. And, because what we're continuing to do is establish that tradition of not only reading, but writing stories. We also created the Black Authors Forum, Quad City Black Authors Collective, which produces for the third time a Black Authors Forum every year during the Bill Bell Jazz and Heritage Festival in Rock Island. So we're talking about literacy across the board. So we're not only encouraging individuals to read, we're encouraging individuals to write. And we have actually identified 30 local Black authors. Some still live here, some were born and raised here, left and whatever, but we try to reach out, word of mouth or whatever. So that group, that collective has grown.
Right.
So I wanted to say those things too, because literacy is across the board. Mm-hmm. It's, listening and writing and reading. And, we hope that we're inspiring young and old readers and writers.
Love that. Great points to end on. Like, it's about inspiration, continuing that legacy, continuing the tradition, going back to the basics,
yes.
As you said. Well, again, thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it. Thank you for watching this episode of Real Conversations, brought to you in partnership with TNBC at the Lincoln Center. In 2026, Real Conversations will be back and better than ever. Episodes will now air every Sunday at 10:30 a.m. We hope you will join us for continuous moments of real voices and real talks. To everyone from the Real Conversations team, we hope you have a very happy new year, and we'll see you next Sunday.
Real Conversations in the QC is sponsored by Essentra Credit Union. Watch Real Conversations in the QC anytime you want at kwqc.com or download our free smart TV streaming app.